welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about our good friend Ramaswamy, aka Vivek Ramaswamy. And where has he been? What has he been up to? What is he doing? Well, a new article coming out from the Daily Caller may give us some insight on that. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. With all that said, let's jump into our daily debate. So, what, in your mind, was the big difference between Trump, Elon, and Vivek? Vivek and Elon seem to be going for it with Doge all on their own, and then Vivek was kind of skirted out. He was pushed out, or at least that's how it appears, because he was constantly talking about cutting the government, about making sure everything's more efficient, that Doge, or at least a solution like Doge, was going to be necessary. And then as we get closer to the actual administration, he seems to disappear. He's not doing as many media hits, and then there's ruminations about him possibly running for governor in Ohio. What happened to him, in your opinion? Was it a misunderstanding? Did he just want to step aside for his own ambition? Let me know what you think. Throw it down in the comment section, right down below that like and subscribe button. So, with all that, let's actually get into the article from the Daily Caller. And this is interesting because it's not just, this is what Vivek plans to do. There seems to be a pretty big announcement that's coming out. And I think, honestly, it's just going to be better to read the quote, and then we can discuss afterwards. Quote, "The group affiliated with Ramaswamy, 39, filed the paperwork with the official office of Ohio's Secretary of State." Just so you know, the group is called Vivek Ramaswamy for Ohio. The quote continues, Frank LaRose. Ramaswamy is expected to launch his campaign February 24th, 2025 at the aerospace company CTL Aerospace, Inc. in his native Cincinnati. He will then speak in Axiom Packaging in New Albany, the Glass City Center in Toledo, and the local bar in Cleveland, the suburb of Strongville. The Associated Press reported, citing an anonymous source. And you see what's going on here too. He's not just planning to go to random locations, random outdoor venues. The bar seems possibly a little bit different, a little bit more homey, but a lot of these seem to be companies, and it's probably going to be about industrial policy for him. These are things that he's willing to talk about. Ohio is I don't want to say fast-growing economy, but it is a place that has had some concentration with some tech startups. Ramaswamy himself bringing a lot of money into the Cleveland area of Ohio. There has always been some sort of industrial base there, and maybe he's going to talk about making sure there are more jobs there in Ohio at some of these companies that seem to be, if you do a brief research, they seem to be picking up now. They're not necessarily the youngest companies in the world. They're not just all startups, but they do have at least a little bit of legacy, but they have the opportunity of new good production in this new economy that we're rolling into. They have the ability to continue to grow, and maybe he's going to make some sort of industrial policy the center of his campaign. And I think that's a theory that's probably not that hard to read, especially from all these locations, but it's something that's interesting because at the end of the day, he has to go to the people of Ohio and say, hey, this is what I can bring you. This is my new idea. He can't just go on the federal level like he did and say, we're going to slash all this spending, because don't get me wrong, Ohio probably does have some waste, just like any other state government, just like any other government, but not to the same degree of the federal government. So he's going to have to bring something new to the table, specifically in Ohio. But it's interesting also that it's a PAC that is basically opening up. He's probably going to be out there fundraising already. The PAC's going to be wide open. They're going to probably have funds in there by the next deadline that they would have to report. And, well, you're going to see probably inflows of millions of dollars. That's another reason he's probably going to these businesses. They have interests. They want to ensure that their companies come out on top if there are any sort of trade deals or any sort of restrictions that Ramaswamy may put on trade. Then again, obviously trade is regulated by the federal government based on the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution, but maybe there's some sort of advantage Ramaswamy would try to give to the native Ohio companies, and this is why these companies may be saying, hey, let's get on his boat early. Let's see what he can offer us. He's a pro-business guy. He has been in the business world. He understands how hard things are. So these are just interesting dynamics, but he has left the federal scene, and this is where he's at. He is in Ohio world now. He's in home, and I think it's actually hilarious that his first place is going to be in Cincinnati. Cincinnati wasn't that far away from where I had lived previously, and I had gone into that city, and it's not my favorite city in the world, but it's an interesting place to kick off because it is definitely more liberal. So he's trying to immediately say, hey, we're going to broach these issues. We're going to come in. I mean, while he is a person who was definitely to the right leaning, I think honestly, that's more, I don't want to say superficial because that implies that he's not to the right. I do believe that he believes in some of the new right things. And when I say new right, the new formation of the right, in that not the ultra more protectionist model, though I think there is some that is undergirding method to that sort of idea in him. But I think when I say the new right, the personal responsibility right, the abdication of common sense right that a lot of people believe they're a part of, it seems like the left has left them behind. I think he's definitely falls in line with that, and I think he could peel people off with some of that language. He is a little bit protectionist. He's a little bit more pro worker domestic protections when it came to being on the presidential stage. So maybe he's the same thing. Maybe he's a localist rather than a nationalist. He's a localist when he's running in Ohio, and I wouldn't say that he called himself a nationalist, but there are undergirdings of nationalism, not the bad definition of nationalism, but putting the U.S. first, that definition of nationalism. Maybe he's a localist when he is there. And if that's the case, that is something that can actually appeal more broadly beyond the Republican Party. And that's why I think it's interesting that he would start in Cincinnati, where he could possibly talk to workers. For all the workers in a voluntary union, he's probably really, really happy to be working with them based on some of his comments previously on something like, the Charlie Kirk show or on any of these other big shows that he got onto. He most definitely has an air of, I am willing to engage on these sort of issues that seem to be possibly taboo with the Republican Party if it means that we're going to make the lives better for our American citizen. And in this case, we'll see if that applies to any Ohio citizen. I believe any Buckeye Stater, or is it Ohioan? That's actually a good question. I'm going to look it up at some point, but that is besides the point, actually, because his choices of where to go inform us of what his strategy may be. And being able to peel away some of that Democratic or even centrist vote in some of these suburbs and large cities based on more Ohio/localist quote-unquote policy may actually be a legitimate strategy that he's been thinking over. So let's jump to our last quote from the Daily Caller. It doesn't necessarily say anything too much. It's not crazy impactful, but it does provide, once again, more context here. Quote, Ramaswamy will reportedly vie for the Republican Party's ticket, challenging Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost and one of Ohio's former Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday Commission members, Heather Hill, after former Ohio Lieutenant Governor and perceived gubernatorial candidate campaign frontrunner John Hoiston dropped out to replace J.D. Vance as one of the Buckeye State's senators, end quote. And that is the other thing that I wanted to cover here, which is this is only possible because of the chain of events that Ramaswamy basically himself put into motion, getting behind Donald Trump, making sure that his friend, J.D. Vance, was on that presidential ticket. He was the VP, and then allowing all these things to continue on where the gubernatorial candidate goes in. Oh wait, hold on, no, we're going to make sure that seat actually gets taken up by Republicans. So the governor of Ohio himself says, nope, hey, we're going to fill J.D. Vance's slot. Here you go. And now the floor is open. So I'm not saying this is a mastermind by Vivek Ramaswamy. That would take a lot of engineering. That would take a lot of game theorying, game engineering, however you want to put it with a better word than what I just said. But the point being that it would take a lot to be able to truly accredit that to Vivek Ramaswamy and say that he was a brilliant tactician. But it's also not impossible, and I don't think it's beyond his head. I don't think he would have to be gamifying it. I think he could honestly just tell Donald Trump, hey, this is what I think a solid plan is. I am the MAGA successor. I embody your MAGA energy on the road. You may not always like me, but hey, maybe it's good to have somebody like me in Ohio during your term. I think honestly that could be a genuine conversation that happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if they worked it out so that it would be that way. So we will see how all of this runs out. Look around for on February 24th. Remember, look at the news, see if Vivek Ramaswamy has announced yet, because it would definitely will be interesting to see one of the first post-MAGA governors, besides maybe Kristi Noem. But even then, I would say a lot of the governors that got elected are not actually MAGA governors. They're more classic Republican governors who agree with MAGA in the post-Trump world, rather than necessarily being straight-up MAGA governors. And though Vivek will have to change his tone in order to win his home state, I think at this point, if he runs like he did before, you could call him a MAGA governor. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out as well. So with that, let's jump into our Daily Delight. This one comes from Animals Around the Globe, and it's about a rescue cat. This article is about a rescue cat that was not looking good, not healthy, and then she opens her eyes, they clean her up, and it is absolutely adorable. If you want your heart to be warm on a Monday midday, this is the article that you should go and read out of all of them. Both articles from today are linked in the description below, that like and subscribe button, like I said, so you can find them there. You can go read their articles in full. And then also, if you want to check out the podcast, it comes out on Spotify, Pocket Cast, and Podvine. That's on the RSS feed. Those links are also in the description. You can go over there, you can download it, listen to the go, that sort of thing. And also the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to this episode and 6 and 6, which is the international news politics podcast that I release on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.